All right, final finishing. All that's left now is to pick up the stitches along the neckline and finish the neck edge. I have, as you recall, we completed the 3-needle bind off on the shoulder seams, and then we eased in the sleeve panels by pinning the sleeve into place, and then using mattress stitch to ease in the sleeves. So that's done, and then the last part was to sew the sleeve seams and the side seams along the edge of your cardigan. So all that being done, the next part is just to pick up the stitches along the neckline, and then you can wear the sweater. So the instructions tell you to use a small 16-inch circular needle. By smallest, they mean the smallest size that you use. So for the trim, you usually use one size smaller than you do for the body of your sweater, which kind of matches what we did on the sleeves, the cuff treatment on the sleeves and on the bottom of the sweater. We started off with a smaller needle here and then went to a bigger needle for the rest of the sweater. So they're telling us to pick up and knit 2 stitches for every 3 rows down the left front neckline. So as my sweater is sitting here facing me, this is my right hand. So the left side of my sweater will be where my right hand is, right? That makes sense, because if you turn the sweater around to wear it, that'll be my left front. So as it's facing me, this is my left front. So we're going to start up here at the edge of the neck, and we're going to pick up 2 stitches for every 3 rows until we get down to down the left front neck edge. And so that's this kind of curvy part here. And then it tells you to pick up, for my size, I'm picking up 14 stitches across here. So that'll be the flat part where they tell me exactly how many stitches to pick up. And probably if I counted my stitches in here, I would have exactly the number that I'm picking up. So here we're going to pick up 2 stitches for every 3 rows. Here they're telling you exactly how many stitches to pick up, and then again it's 2 stitches for every 3 rows up the right front neck edge. So that'll be to here, and then let's see, up the right front for every 3 rows, up right front neck and down right back neck. Okay, so actually going to pick up 2 stitches for every 3 rows all the way to here. Again, wherever it's curvy, it's 2 stitches for every 3 rows. And then turning so that my back is facing, I'm going to pick up a specific number of stitches across this flat part here. So from here to here, and then 2 stitches for every 3 rows to go back up to where my beginning point is. So let's do that. I've got a ball of yarn. I've got my smaller knitting needle in a 16-inch length, and I'm going to pick up 2 stitches for every 3 rows starting from here. So I'll put my first stitch right in the, I'm going to put it right in the 3-needle bind off section. I'll take this marker out now. So to pick up stitches, they do say pick up and knit. That's good. So when you're picking up stitches, you're really just picking up the edge of a stitch like this. But when you pick up a knit, you're inserting your needle through the fabric. You're yarning over in the back. So for this first one, I'm just going to fold a loop around my needle. Here's the tail of my yarn. So I'm just going to fold a loop around the needle, and you're pulling that stitch up. That's the and knit part. Okay, and then using the tail that is, so again, some people will, to anchor this in here, what you can do is the next stitch you can use both strands held together. So let's try that. I'm going to put my next stitch in. You can see that my rows are here. You can see the little little arrows here that show you my rows. So I'm going to put my first stitch right in this space right here. It doesn't matter whether I go here or here or here, except that if I go here, I'm really close to the edge and my stitch may not be very stable. If I go here, I've got, you know, I'm going to have a little bit of a seam on the underside of my neckline, but I feel like it's going to be stronger if I put my needle in along this line than if I put it in right here. And remember, trying to find that edge stitch is really hard, working right on the edge. So I'm going in one stitch in. And the first time I do this, I'm going to use both strands of my yarn just to anchor it together. So I'm wrapping the yarn around the needle, pulling that loop up to the surface of my work. There it is, and that's the knit part. And now, so that was one, that's 1, 2. So I've picked up one in the 3 needle bind off and one in the row just below it. So it's pick up 2 stitches for every 3 rows. So the next row where I might put my needle in here, I'm going to skip that one and go down to the one following it. And again, I'm just going to do this double stranded for a little bit just to anchor my yarn. So I'll bring that loop up. Now I'll get rid of the short tail. I'm just going to let it dangle and carry on with the yarn that's attached to the ball. So 1, 2, there's the next row. I'm going to skip it. 1, 2, skip the third one. 1, 2, and then I'm looking under my needle here to ensure that I've got kind of a straight line going here, or, you know, I'm following the same row along here. Salvage stitches, that's what they're for. Okay, now find the next row, skip it. 1, 2, skip 1, 1, 2. Have a look, looks good. 1, 2. Skip 1, 1, 2, skip 1, 1, 2. Okay, so here you can see that that was my decrease edge along the neckline, and here's where I was binding off those little step stitches. So now I'm kind of working into the heads of stitches rather than into the sides of stitches. So I've got one there, and I'm going to skip one. I think I can put one more right here. And so when I'm putting a stitch, when I'm picking up a stitch in the top of a row or in the top of a column, I always look for the V, and then I go into the middle of the V. And that way when I knit on top of it, it will look like one continuous row of knitting. Okay, so I've got all along here, and I'm going to keep my marker in place here because when I get to the other side over here, I'm going to try and pick up about the same number of stitches that I did over here. If I don't pick up exactly the same number of stitches, it's okay, but I want to be close. So I'm going to take my locking stitch marker out, and I'm going to put it on my needle, so that'll help me to remember how many stitches I picked up along the left front neck edge. And now I'm going to work my way across, picking up one stitch for every stitch on this on the bound off edge here. For me, that number is 14. So I'm just looking for the stitch below the cast off edge. So if I pull it up with my needle here, you can kind of see there's the stitch underneath here. You can see it better here. Here's the stitch underneath the bound off edge, so I'm definitely going to put my needle in there, but there's the one right beside it. So I'm going to start here. 1, and then here's the next one just under the bound off edge there. 2, there's the next one. 3, 4, see that there? It's hiding under the bound off edge. 5, 6, Okay, just trying to keep it nice and neat. 7. There we go. I'm looking for the V underneath there. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and I got 15 here. But again, I'm not going to worry about that too much. I was told to pick up 14. I feel like it's better to not leave any gaps along a horizontal edge. So I've got 15 in here, that's fine. I'm going to take my stitch marker off, put it on my needle, and then I'm just going to go back here and count, just out of interest. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 19. So I'm going to try and pick up about the same number, but it's not a big deal. Oops, not a big deal if it's different. So again, back on this angled part where we're picking up stitches partly in the tops of rows, but partly on the sides of rows, we're going to go back to the 2 stitches for every 4 rows. So I'm going to start here. Here, this is the top of a column. So I'm going to find the knit stitch right at the top of that column, but still underneath a little bound off edge there. That's 1. Here's 2. Skip a row. So where's the next row? It's right over here. So I'm going to jump. That just feels like too big a jump. I'm going to go here. 1, 2, skip a row, and now we're into the selvage edge on this side. So just looking to see whether I want to go here or in between here, and I look back on this side and I can see that I've got kind of like a full row of stitches along here, so I'm going to do the same thing on this side and go right up in there. So skip that one. 1, 2, so it leaves that decrease underneath my needles. Skip 1, 1, 2. Skip 1. It's kind of hard to see, so I'm just looking for a little bar there. So there it is. That's where I would put my needle, but I'm skipping that one. 1, 2. Skip that one. 1, 2. Skip that one right there. I'm skipping that one. 1, 2. And I'm going to put 1 in my 3 needle bind off edge just like I did on the other side. Let's see how close I am. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15. So I've got 15 here and 19 here. So I'm going to, I think I'm going to add a couple back here. If you want to do something like that, you can just pull these stitches off your needle. They're not attached to anything. Okay, and I'm going to squeeze a couple more in here just to make my numbers a little closer together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I'm going to skip one now, 8, 9, 10, doing 3 stitches for every row instead of 2 for every 3, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and one in the top here is 17. So now I have 17 stitches on this side. I have 19 stitches on this side, and that's close enough. That's not too bad. All right, now I'm going to pick up, like turn this around. Okay, and I'm going to continue to pick up 2 stitches for every 3 rows along this side, the number of stitches specified across the back, and 2 stitches for every 3 rows along this side. I'll meet you back here at this point. All right, here I am. I've picked up stitches all the way around my neckline, and I've counted my stitches. The next instruction is to count your stitches and to reduce or increase to end up with a multiple of 20. So I repositioned my stitch markers here. I counted off 20 stitches all the way around. 20 is a multiple of 4. And when I got to the end here, I had, coming up to the beginning of the round, I had 13 stitches. So that means that somewhere along here, I need to reduce my stitch count by 1. So that's easy enough to do. I think what I will do is I'll place that somewhere either on the back of the neck or on the sides. And I kind of think that the back of the neck would be the easiest. So I'm going to just put my locking stitch marker in here on these 2 stitches right here. I'm going to lock them together, and that'll be my reminder to knit or purl those 2 stitches together when I get to them. And I'll take out the markers as I go along. So putting a new beginning of the round marker on your needle, you will continue in pattern to do 6 rounds of 2 by 2 rib. If you did what I did here, remember to make sure that when you knit these first couple of doubled stitches, you get them together. So there's 2 knits and 2 purls. So now you can continue to work your way around your neckline. We're doing the ribbed pattern here. I'm going to remove the stitch markers as I come to them and just leave my beginning of the round marker there. And a reminder to myself to knit or purl 2 stitches together as I get to them at the end of this round. And that's how you can deal with increasing or decreasing. So if you had to increase, you might just put a stitch marker, a locking stitch marker, on 1 stitch, just as a reminder that when you get to that stitch, you should increase before or after or into that stitch. Okay? And so as I get to each stitch marker, because I've put them 20 stitches apart, when I get to the stitch marker, I should be ending with 2 purls. So that helps me to remember that I've counted correctly and that I haven't missed a stitch in the pattern, you know, just done 1 knit instead of 2 knits, something like that. Okay, so that's your assignment. That's picking up stitches and working the neckline. I'll come back when it's time to bind off with some tips for binding off loosely or not too tightly around the neckline. See you then. And finally, we get to the bind off. I thought about doing a different bind off. I thought about it, and then I thought, why wouldn't I use the bind off that I always love and use? So that's what I'm going to do. When I bind off, I like to use Lucy Neat Bee's modified conventional bind off. I've spoken to you about that before, I think. So I'm going to show you here how it's done, and I'll put in a link to Lucy's method as well, or to Lucy's video. To do the modified conventional bind off, you start by knitting 1 stitch, and then you slip that, to do it knitwise, slip that knit stitch back onto your left hand needle, and with the tip of your right hand needle, insert it purlwise into the knit stitch that you just knitwise into the next stitch, and then knit them together, coming through the base. See how those stitches cross over? You come through the base of the stitches like that. I'll do that again. But The next stitch I've got coming up is a purl stitch, and I want to bind it off purlwise. So when I've got a purl stitch coming up, I'll bring my yarn to the front. I'll slide the stitch that is on my right hand needle onto my left hand needle, and then I purl those two together. The next stitch is also a purl stitch, so while the yarn is in front, I'll slip that purl stitch back onto the left hand needle, insert my right hand needle into both of those stitches, and purl them together. Here we come up to a knit stitch here, so I'll take my yarn to the back, I slide the stitch on my right hand needle back onto the left hand needle, I insert the right hand needle into the first stitch purlwise, into the second stitch knitwise, and that causes them to kind of cross over. So where my needle is going into the stitch, you can see that there's a little X above it. You want to yarn over and bring that yarn over in between the stitches and the base of that X and take it off. I'm going to do that again. Slide the stitch back onto the left hand needle, insert your right hand needle purlwise, then knitwise, knit them together through the base of the cross on your needles. All right, now I'm going to speed it up a little bit just to show you how nice and easy this is. So purl stitch coming up, yarn to the front, slip the right stitch on, purl two together, slip the stitch on the right hand on, purl two together, knit stitch, slip the stitch back on, and while the needle's still in there, just grab the next stitch, knit them together, slip, knit, together, yarn forward, slip, purl two together, yarn forward, purl two together. Okay, after you've done a few stitches, test that your bind off is not too tight. Again, you want it to have some elasticity in there. You don't want it to be ruffled. You want it to stand up nice and straight, and yet you want to be able to put it on over your head, so you don't want it to be too tight. So some elasticity in there, but still maintaining its kind of structure without becoming too wavy. So that's my favorite method of binding off. Certainly not the only method of binding off. This is Lucy Neatby's modified conventional bind off for the knit stitch and purl two together for the purl stitches. And that's pretty much the end of our sweater. Once this is done, you're going to weave in all your ends, maybe give your sweater one more wash, and then wear it with pride. I'll see you at our knit along. Maybe you'll be wearing your sweater. Thanks, everybody.